The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in their designated sections, breathing different atmospheres through personal life support systems. The Zenthari floated in their water tanks. The rock-like Gorvani sat motionless on heated platforms. The insect-like Crix buzzed quietly in their hive clusters. At the center of it all, the High Council's platform rose like a mountain of silver metal. 12 beings sat there, representing the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They had ruled for 10,000 years, keeping peace through careful hierarchy and strict order. Today felt like any other session. Trade disputes, territorial agreements, resource allocation, the usual business of governing a galaxy with over 2 million inhabited worlds. Chancellor Vexthul, a tall being with purple skin and 4 arms, called the session to order. His voice echoed through translation devices in thousands of languages. The Council recognizes the human delegation. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked to the speaking platform. She was small compared to most beings in the hall, wearing a simple blue uniform that marked her as a representative of Earth and its colonies. Her brown hair was pulled back and she carried a single datapad. The humans had been part of galactic society for only 200 years. They were considered young, inexperienced, often troublesome. They asked too many questions. They challenged traditions that had worked for millennia. Many council members saw them as useful but annoying, like children who had not yet learned their place. Elena stood at the podium and activated the translation system. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space. "Honored council members and fellow beings," she began, "I stand before you today to deliver a message from the United Terran Federation and all human colonies throughout the galaxy." She paused, looking around the hall. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and other perception organs focused on her. After careful consideration and much debate, humanity has decided to withdraw from the Galactic Council and galactic civilization entirely. A murmur ran through the hall. Several beings shifted in their seats. The Chancellor raised one of his 4 hands for silence. "We are not leaving in anger," Elena continued. "We hold no grudge against any species or world. We simply believe it is time for us to find our own path among the stars." Councillor Thexhai of the Corvan Union leaned forward. The Corvans looked somewhat like humans, but with silver skin and larger eyes. They had always been more sympathetic to human concerns than other council members. "Ambassador Vasquez," Thexhai said, "surely this is hasty. If there are grievances, they can be addressed through proper channels." Elena shook her head gently. "There are no grievances, Councillor. This is not about anger or conflict. We simply wish to pursue our own development without the constraints of galactic law and custom." Chancellor Vexthul's expression remained neutral, but many in the hall could sense his relief. The humans had been pushing for reforms for decades. They wanted more representation for younger species. They questioned why the same 12 species had held power for so long. They proposed radical ideas about equality and democracy that made the older species uncomfortable. "What of your colonies?" asked Councillor Zafara, a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a tree. "The 17 human worlds, the research stations, the trading posts." "All human personnel and civilians will be evacuated within 6 months, Elena replied. "We will leave all infrastructure intact as a gift to whatever species wish to claim these territories. We ask only for safe passage during our departure." The hall erupted in surprised chatter. Many species had expected the humans to demand compensation or territorial concessions. Instead, they were simply leaving everything behind. "You understand," Chancellor Vexthul said slowly, "that once you leave galactic society, you cannot return. The laws are clear. Any species that withdraws forfeits all rights and protections under galactic law." "We understand completely," Elena said. "We accept these terms." Councillor Thexhai tried once more. "Ambassador, your people have contributed much to our civilization. Your medical researchers, your engineers, your diplomats. Surely there is some way to resolve whatever concerns have led to this decision." Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but carried clearly through the hall. "Councillor Thexhai, we are grateful for your kindness, but humanity has learned much during our time here. We have seen how this galaxy is governed. We have seen which voices are heard and which are ignored. We have seen how progress is measured and what kinds of change are permitted." She looked around the hall once more. "We do not condemn this system. It has brought stability to countless worlds. But it is not our system. We wish to see what we might build on our own. The Chancellor's relief was now obvious to everyone in the hall. The humans had been a constant source of disruption. They proposed new ideas at every session. They formed alliances with younger species. They questioned decisions that had been made by beings far older and more experienced. Very well, Chancellor Vexthul announced. The Council accepts humanity's withdrawal from galactic civilization. All human territories are hereby declared open for claim by Council member species. Safe passage is granted for all human vessels and personnel during their departure. The vote was quick and unanimous. Within minutes it was done. Humanity was officially no longer part of galactic society. As Elena walked away from the podium, Councillor HFY called out to her. "Ambassador, where will you go?" Elena turned back with a small smile. "Somewhere we can grow, Councillor. Somewhere we can become what we are meant to be." Within days, human ships began departing from every corner of the galaxy. They moved efficiently and quietly. Research stations were abandoned with all equipment left behind. Colonies were evacuated with careful attention to leaving infrastructure intact. Trade agreements were honored to the letter before being terminated. The humans asked for nothing beyond safe passage. They demanded no compensation. They filed no complaints or protests. They simply gathered their people and left. Most species watched with mild curiosity. The humans had been useful trading partners and skilled researchers, but they had also been troublemakers. Many beings were relieved to see them go. The Zenthari delegation celebrated quietly in their water tanks. The humans had been pushing for environmental protection laws that would have limited mining operations on ocean worlds. The Gorvani expressed satisfaction through their mineral-based communication system. Human archaeologists had been asking uncomfortable questions about ancient ruins that the Gorvani preferred to keep buried. Even some of the younger species seemed relieved. The humans had a way of making other beings feel inadequate. They learned languages quickly, adapted to new environments easily, and formed friendships across species lines in ways that made others uncomfortable. Only Councillor HFY seemed troubled by the whole affair. As the last human ship disappeared from the sensor screens around Earth, the Corvan found himself wondering what they had just lost. But the Chancellor was already moving on to other business. New territorial claims to process, trade routes to reassign. The galaxy was a simpler place now, he thought. More orderly, more predictable. The humans were gone, and everything could return to the way it had always been. The Council members congratulated themselves on handling the situation so smoothly. No war, no anger, no messy diplomatic crisis. Just a clean separation that left everyone free to pursue their own interests. As the session ended, and beings began to disperse to their respective ships and habitats, none of them could have imagined what would begin to unravel in the months ahead. The humans were gone, and slowly, the galaxy would begin to understand what that truly meant. 6 months after the last human ship vanished from galactic space, the first problems began to appear. It started small. A trade route between the Altair system and the Centauri colonies stopped functioning properly. Ships arrived late or not at all. Cargo containers were damaged. Communication systems failed at critical moments. Councillor Zephyra brought the issue to the Council's attention during a routine session. The route has been unreliable for 3 weeks now, the tree-like being reported. We have lost 7 shipments of medical supplies. Chancellor Vexthul waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Technical problems happen. Assign a maintenance crew to check the navigation beacons. But when the maintenance crew arrived, they found something unexpected. The navigation system was incredibly complex. It used mathematical calculations that none of them could understand. The documentation was written in dozens of languages, many of which were no longer commonly used. Who designed this system? The Gorvani engineer asked through his translation device. The maintenance supervisor, a 6-legged Crix, checked the records. According to this, it was updated and maintained by human technicians for the past 40 years. They tried to repair the system using standard galactic protocols. The route worked for a few days, then failed again. Ships began taking longer paths around the damaged section, adding weeks to their journeys. Similar problems appeared throughout the galaxy. On Kepler Station, a major research facility, the atmospheric processors began malfunctioning. The air became thin and stale. Scientists complained of headaches and fatigue. The Zenthari technical team investigated, They found that the life support system had been modified over many years with improvements that no one had documented properly. The modifications were brilliant but complex. Without the humans who had installed them, no one could understand how they worked. "We will have to replace the entire system." The lead Zenthari engineer bubbled through her translation unit. "It will take months and cost millions of credits." On the agricultural world of Demeter's garden, the crops began failing. The soil had been treated with a special mixture of minerals and biological agents that kept it fertile, despite intensive farming. But the formula was stored in human databases that had been wiped clean before their departure. The Gorvani farmers tried to recreate the treatment using standard methods. The first harvest was poor. The second harvest failed completely. Without the human-developed soil treatment, the planet could not feed the billion beings who lived there. Dr. Kestha, a Corvan medical researcher, faced a different crisis. She had been working with a team of human scientists to develop a cure for the Zephyrian plague, a disease that affected several species but was particularly deadly to the insect-like crics. The plague had appeared 3 years earlier, spreading rapidly through the galactic trade networks. It caused painful lesions and respiratory failure. Millions had died before the spread was contained to certain sectors. The human researchers had made significant progress. They understood how the disease worked and had developed promising treatments. But when they left, they took their research with them. "We were so close," Dr. Kestha reported to the medical council. "Another few months and we would have had a complete cure. Now we must start over." The plague continued to spread. Without human medical ships providing aid to infected worlds, the death toll began rising again. Councillor Thexhai watched these reports with growing concern. The Corvan had always paid attention to details that other council members ignored. Now he began to see a pattern. The humans had not just participated in galactic society, they had woven themselves into its very foundation. They had quietly improved systems, solved problems, and maintained connections that no one else had noticed. In the archives, Thexhai found records of human involvement in thousands of projects. They had designed communication networks that linked species who could not normally talk to each other. They had created cultural exchange programs that prevented conflicts between incompatible civilizations. They had volunteered for dangerous missions to plague worlds, disaster zones, and war-torn regions. "Look at this," Thexhai said to his assistant, a young Corvan named Veltar. "The humans mediated the peace treaty between the Crystalline Collective and the Gas Giants Union. They designed the translation protocols that allow the Hive Queens to speak with individual consciousness species. They created the disaster response network that coordinates aid across the galaxy." Veltar examined the data. "I had no idea they were involved in so many things." "Neither did anyone else," Thexhai replied. "They never asked for credit. They never demanded recognition. They just helped." But the other council members remained unconcerned. When Thexhai brought his findings to their attention, Chancellor Vexthul was dismissive. "Growing pains," the Chancellor said. "Anytime there is change, there are temporary difficulties. Other species will learn to fill these roles. But what if they cannot?" Thexhai asked. "What if the humans were doing things that no one else can do?" "Impossible," Councillor Zephyra declared. "Humans are a young species. Anything they could do, older and wiser species can do better." Thexhai was not convinced, but he could not argue with the majority. The council believed that the human departure was ultimately beneficial. The galaxy was more stable without their constant questions and proposals for change. As months passed, more problems emerged. The Great Library of Andromeda, repository of galactic knowledge, began losing data. The human linguists and cultural experts had been maintaining archives of thousands of extinct languages and civilizations. Without them, vast sections of historical knowledge became inaccessible. Trade disputes that humans had quietly mediated began flaring into open conflicts. The humans had a talent for understanding different species' perspectives and finding compromises that everyone could accept. Without their diplomatic services, negotiations stalled and tensions rose. On the frontier worlds, exploration missions stopped reporting back. The humans had been the primary scouts and first contact specialists for the galaxy. They were better at adapting to new environments and communicating with unknown species than anyone else. Without them, expansion into uncharted space ground to a halt. Dr. Kestha received a report that shook her to her core. The Zephyrian plague had jumped to a new species. The elegant swimmers, a graceful aquatic race, were dying by the thousands. Their biological processes were completely different from the Cricks, but somehow the disease had adapted. This should not be possible, she told her research team. The plague cannot naturally evolve this quickly, but without the human researchers and their unique insights into biological adaptation, no one could understand what was happening. The plague continued to spread and evolve, becoming deadlier with each new outbreak. HFY compiled all these incidents into a comprehensive report. The document grew longer each week as new problems emerged. Equipment failures, communication breakdowns, research setbacks, diplomatic crises, exploration halts, medical emergencies. The pattern was clear to him now. Humanity had been far more than just another member species. They had been the connective tissue that held galactic civilization together. They had filled gaps that other species could not even see. But when he presented his findings to the Council, the response was always the same. Temporary problems. Growing pains. Other species will adapt. Chancellor Vexthul grew irritated with HFY's persistent warnings. Counselor, your concern for the humans is noted, but they are gone. We must focus on moving forward, not looking backward. But what if we cannot move forward without them? HFY asked. Then we were never as strong as we believed, the Chancellor replied coldly, and that would be our weakness, not their fault. As the first year of human absence drew to a close, HFY sat in his private chambers reviewing the latest reports. Communication networks failing, trade routes collapsing, research projects abandoned, conflicts escalating, plagues spreading. The galaxy was slowly falling apart and no one wanted to admit it. Outside his window, stars glittered in patterns that human astronomers had mapped and named. Those names were already being forgotten. Soon, HFY thought, much more would be forgotten as well. The humans were gone, and the galaxy was learning what their quiet presence had truly meant. 2 years had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and the galaxy was dying by degrees. The news came to the council chambers like a physical blow. The Centauri Mining Consortium, one of the largest resource extraction operations in the galaxy, had suffered a catastrophic collapse. 14 mining platforms destroyed, over 3,000 workers dead. The asteroid mining operation that supplied rare metals to half the galaxy was gone. Councillor Jexara delivered the report with shaking branches. The safety protocols were inadequate. The mining crews tried to increase efficiency by modifying the original procedures. The modifications were based on incomplete understanding of the systems. Chancellor Vexthul leaned forward in his seat. What were the original procedures? They were designed by human engineers 40 years ago, Jexara replied quietly. The documentation was complex. The current crews believed they could simplify the processes. Councillor HFY had been dreading this moment for months. The human safety protocols were not just rules, he said. They were based on deep understanding of how different species react under stress, how equipment fails, how accidents cascade into disasters. You cannot simplify something you do not understand. But the mining disaster was only the beginning. The Great Library of Andromeda, the galaxy's greatest repository of knowledge, announced that 40% of its archives were now inaccessible. The human linguists and xenoarchaeologists had maintained vast databases of ancient languages, cultural artifacts, and historical records. Without them, entire civilizations were being forgotten. Chief Librarian Kesavor, an ancient being whose species lived for thousands of years, addressed the council with obvious distress. We have lost contact with our past, the ethereal creature sang through harmonic frequencies. Thousands of worlds, millions of years of history, countless achievements and discoveries. The humans were our memory keepers. Without them, we are becoming a species with amnesia. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. The library had depended on human researchers to bridge the gaps between incompatible alien mindsets and languages. No other species had their unique combination of empathy, adaptability, and curiosity. But the crisis deepened beyond cultural loss. Star systems that had been stable for centuries began descending into chaos. The Vega system erupted into a three-way war between species that had coexisted peacefully for generations. The Proxima colonies collapsed into tribal violence. The beautiful garden worlds of the Tau Ceti Alliance became battlegrounds. General Kriegsthack of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force reported to the Council with exhaustion in his voice. "We cannot keep up," the insectoid warrior buzzed. "Every week brings new conflicts. Species that have been allies for generations are at each other's throats. What is causing these conflicts?" Chancellor Vexthul demanded. "Old grievances that were never really resolved," the general replied. "Territorial disputes, resource claims, cultural misunderstandings. The humans, they had a gift for finding solutions that everyone could accept. They would spend months talking to all sides, understanding every perspective, creating compromises that satisfied everyone's essential needs." Vexhai nodded grimly. They were natural diplomats. They could see connections that others missed, find common ground between species that seemed to have nothing in common. "And now," the Chancellor asked. "Now we have only force," General Kriegsthack said. "We can stop the fighting temporarily, but we cannot address the underlying causes." The humans understood something about cooperation that we have lost. The medical crisis was even worse. The Zephyrian plague had evolved beyond anyone's ability to control. It now affected 17 different species, and had developed resistance to every treatment the galactic medical establishment could devise. Dr. Kesitha, now the Chief Medical Officer for Plague Response, delivered her report with defeat in her voice. "The disease is learning faster than we are. It adapts to our treatments within days. We need new approaches, new ways of thinking about biological systems." "What did the humans know that we do not?" Counselor Jexara asked. "They understood adaptation," Dr. Kesitha replied. "They came from a world where survival meant constant change. They knew how to think like the disease, to anticipate its evolution. Their research methods were unconventional but effective. The plague was now killing millions every month. Entire star systems were under quarantine. The elegant swimmers were close to extinction. The crystalline beings of Altair Prime were dissolving from the inside out. Technology across the galaxy was failing. Equipment that had worked perfectly for decades was breaking down. Computer networks were becoming unreliable. Starships were suffering mysterious malfunctions. Chief Engineer Vorthak of the Galactic Technical Council explained the problem to an increasingly desperate group of leaders. The humans did not just fix things, the mechanical being stated through synthesized speech. They improved everything they touched. They would see a problem and not just solve it, but prevent similar problems from occurring. They thought in systems, in connections, in long-term consequences. "Give me an example," the Chancellor demanded. "The navigation network between the core worlds and the rim," Vorthak replied. "It worked flawlessly for 50 years because human technicians regularly updated it, based on changing stellar conditions, shipping patterns, and technological improvements. They left no documentation because the improvements were constant and intuitive. Now the network is degrading and we cannot maintain it." Similar stories emerged from across the galaxy. Human-improved communication systems were losing clarity. Human-designed transportation networks were experiencing delays and failures. Human-modified life support systems were becoming unreliable. The economic impact was devastating. Trade routes that had been profitable for generations were now operating at losses. Worlds that had specialized in certain products could no longer get their goods to market efficiently. The complex web of galactic commerce was unraveling. But perhaps the most disturbing development was the complete halt of galactic exploration. For 200 years, the frontier had been expanding steadily. New worlds were discovered, new resources found, new species contacted. Humanity had led most of these efforts. Captain Zeftar of the Exploration Service delivered the final blow to the Council's confidence. "We have lost contact with 47 exploration missions," she reported. "We do not know if they are dead, lost, or simply unable to communicate." "What happened to them?" the Chancellor asked. "The humans were our first contact specialists," Captain Zeftar explained. "They had an ability to communicate with species that had never seen spaceflight before. They could adapt to any environment, learn any language, understand any culture. Without them, we cannot safely make contact with new civilizations. Surely other species can learn these skills," Counselor Jexara protested. "We have tried," the captain replied. "Our best diplomats, our most skilled linguists, our most adaptable species. They cannot do what the humans did naturally. First contact requires a combination of empathy, courage, and adaptability that appears to be uniquely human." The galaxy was not just losing its ability to grow, it was losing its ability to maintain what it had already built. Thexai sat in his private chambers, reviewing reports that painted an increasingly dark picture. The carefully ordered civilization that the Galaxy Council had maintained for 10,000 years was collapsing. Not because of war or disaster, but because a single species had quietly withdrawn their support. His assistant Veltar entered with the latest data. "The situation continues to deteriorate," the young Corvin reported. "Food shortages on 17 worlds, communication blackouts in 30 systems, complete governmental collapse in the Rigel sector." "How long do we have?" Thexai asked. Veltar was quiet for a moment. "At current rates of decline, perhaps 5 more years before galactic civilization ceases to function entirely." Thexai closed his eyes. The humans had tried to warn them. For 200 years they had pushed for reforms, for inclusion of younger species, for more flexibility in galactic governance. They had wanted to share responsibility, to teach others their methods, to create a more resilient civilization. Instead, they had been ignored, dismissed, told to respect traditions they could not understand. Now the galaxy was learning what those traditions were really worth. "What do we do?" Veltar asked. Thexai looked out at the stars, wondering where among them the humans had gone. "We hope," he said quietly, "that we can find them before it is too late." The decision to search for humanity was not made easily. 3 years after their departure, with galactic civilization crumbling around them, the Council finally admitted what Councillor Thexai had been saying all along. They needed the humans back. Chancellor Vexthul stood before the assembled council, his forearms trembling slightly with age and stress. The purple-skinned leader looked older than his 1,000 years. The weight of watching his carefully ordered galaxy fall apart had aged him rapidly. "We face a choice," he announced to the chamber. "We can continue to pretend that these problems are temporary, or we can acknowledge that we made an error in allowing humanity to leave without understanding their true value to our civilization." The admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled beings. The Chancellor had never admitted to making a mistake in his 5 centuries of leadership. "Therefore," he continued, "I am authorizing a comprehensive search for human settlements. We will offer them whatever terms necessary to convince them to return and help restore stability to our galaxy." Councillor Jexara rustled her branches nervously. "What if they refuse? What if they have moved beyond our reach? Then we will have learned the cost of our arrogance," Thexai replied grimly. "But we must try." The search began immediately. Exploration ships were dispatched to every region where humans might have settled. The Galactic Navy reassigned its fastest vessels to the mission. Even species that had rarely cooperated with each other joined the effort. The first discoveries were encouraging. Human colonies were found throughout the Outer Rim, exactly where they had said they would go. Abandoned cities on terraformed worlds, mining operations on asteroid belts, research stations in deep space, but every single settlement was empty. Captain Zeftar led the first major expedition to New Terra, humanity's largest colony world outside Earth's solar system. The planet had housed 12 million humans and had been their primary agricultural center. "It is like they simply vanished," she reported to the council. "The cities are intact. The farms are still growing food. The power plants are running, but there is no one here." Her team explored the empty streets of New Geneva, the colony's capital. They found homes with meals still on the tables, libraries full of books in dozens of languages, schools with lessons written on boards, but no people. "How does an entire population just disappear?" her first officer asked. "Very carefully," Captain Zeftar replied, studying the evidence. "Look at this. No signs of struggle, no damaged equipment, no abandoned possessions. They planned this evacuation down to the smallest detail." Similar reports came from human settlements across the galaxy. Kepler Station, humanity's largest space habitat, was found drifting in perfect working order but completely empty. The agricultural world of Harvest had crops ready for collection, but no farmers to gather them. The research moon of Epsilon Eridani contained laboratories full of ongoing experiments, all carefully shut down and preserved. The humans had left everything behind, but they had taken themselves and all traces of where they were going. Dr. Kesitha joined the search efforts, hoping to find some clue about the plague research. She led a team to the medical research facility on Pasteur Station, where human scientists had been working on the most advanced biological studies in the galaxy. "This is incredible," she told her team as they explored the empty laboratories. They have left all their equipment, all their data, all their research materials. But the conclusions, the final discoveries, the breakthrough insights, those are gone. She found partially completed research projects that showed human scientists had been on the verge of major medical advances. Cures for genetic diseases, treatments for radiation poisoning, methods for extending life across multiple species, all abandoned just before completion. They could have finished this work, one of her assistants observed. These discoveries could have saved millions of lives. That might be exactly why they took the knowledge with them, Dr. Kessethaw realized. They knew we would come looking for them. They made sure we would need them, not just their discoveries. The search expanded beyond abandoned colonies. Long-range sensors swept the galactic rim looking for energy signatures that might indicate human presence. Communication arrays broadcast messages in every human language, offering negotiation and reconciliation, but the humans seemed to have vanished completely. General Crixthak led a military expedition to the former human naval base at Wolf 359. The base had been humanity's primary military installation, home to their small but advanced fleet. The shipyards are empty, he reported. But look at this. He transmitted images of the abandoned facilities. These construction bays are far larger than anything the humans had before. And these energy readings? They were building something much more advanced than any ship in the galactic database. The implications were troubling. The humans had not just left quietly. They had been preparing for departure for years, possibly decades. They had developed new technologies that surpassed anything the Council knew about. Where could they have gone? Chancellor Vexthol asked during an emergency session. Beyond our ability to track them, General Crixthak replied. Their new ships appear to use some form of faster-than-light travel that does not leave the energy signatures we can detect. They could be anywhere in the galaxy, or they might have left the galaxy entirely. The search continued for months without success. Every human settlement was found abandoned but intact. Every clue led to dead ends. The humans had planned their disappearance with the same careful attention to detail they had brought to everything else. Then, on the rim world of Kepler 442b, they found something different. The planet had been a minor human research outpost, studying the unique crystalline formations in its crust. Like all the others, it was abandoned. But in the main research facility, carved into a wall of natural crystal, was a message. The message was written in 17 different languages, representing every major species in the galaxy. The translation devices rendered it into perfect clarity. To whoever finds this message, we are not hiding from you. We have not left in anger or fear. We have simply chosen to grow in our own way, at our own pace according to our own values. We are building something new among the stars, something that reflects our hopes rather than your traditions. When you are ready to listen instead of rule, when you seek partnership instead of hierarchy, you will find us. Until then, we wish you well on your own journey. Below the message was a single coordinate, pointing toward empty space beyond the galactic rim. Thexhai studied the message for hours. The words were diplomatic, even kind, but the meaning was clear. The humans had not just left. They had evolved beyond the need for galactic civilization as it currently existed. They are giving us a choice, he told the emergency council session. We can continue as we always have, or we can change. Change how? Counselor Zegzara asked. That is what we must figure out, Thexhai replied. But I think they want us to become something better than what we are. An expedition was mounted to investigate the coordinates. The fastest ship in the galaxy, equipped with the most advanced sensors available, was sent to the location specified in the message. What they found there changed everything. Space itself was different at those coordinates. Energy readings that made no sense. Gravitational anomalies that suggested massive construction projects. And at the edge of sensor range, just barely detectable, the signatures of ships using technology that was decades ahead of anything in the galactic database. They are out there, Captain Zeftar reported, and they are not hiding. They are waiting. The realization hit the council like a physical blow. The humans had not fled in weakness. They had left in strength. While the galaxy had stagnated under rigid traditions, humanity had continued to grow, to learn, to advance. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that had transcended the need for the very civilization that had shaped them. "What do we do now?" Chancellor Vexthul asked, his voice barely a whisper. HFY looked around the chamber at the faces of beings whose species had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They looked lost, confused, afraid. For the first time in 10,000 years, they did not know what came next. "We decide what kind of civilization we want to be," he said, "and we hope that when we make that decision, it will be good enough to earn humanity's return." But time was running out. The galaxy was still collapsing, and somewhere beyond the rim, the humans were watching and waiting to see if their former neighbors could learn to become something worthy of their partnership. 5 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy stood on the edge of complete collapse. The Galactic Council chamber, once a symbol of order and stability, now felt like a tomb. Half the seats were empty. Many species had withdrawn from galactic society entirely, focusing on their own survival as communication networks failed and trade routes collapsed. Chancellor Vexthul looked ancient. His purple skin had faded to a sickly gray. 2 of his forearms hung uselessly at his sides, paralyzed by stress and exhaustion. The great leader who had ruled for 5 centuries was dying, and everyone could see it. "The reports," he whispered to his aide. The aide, a young Zenthari floating in a portable water tank, delivered the latest catastrophic news. "The Rigel sector has declared independence from the Council. The Crystalline Collective has sealed their borders completely. The Zephyrian plague has reached the core worlds. Over 2 billion beings have died in the past month alone." Councillor HFY sat in his seat, reviewing the proposals he had been fighting for since the humans left. Democratic representation for younger species, flexible governance structures, cultural exchange programs, scientific cooperation protocols, everything the humans had tried to implement during their time in galactic society. But it was too late. The reforms that might have saved galactic civilization were meaningless now. There was barely any civilization left to reform. "Councillor HFY," the Chancellor wheezed, "your proposal for emergency restructuring?" HFY stood slowly. 14 species have agreed to the Democratic Council structure. 23 worlds are willing to share resources under the mutual aid protocols. But it is not enough. We need expertise we no longer possess. We need the knowledge that we lost when the humans left. "And they still have not responded to our communications?" "They respond," HFY said quietly. "Every message we send is acknowledged. But their answer is always the same. They will help individual worlds that request assistance directly. They will not work with the Council as it currently exists." The irony was bitter. The humans were helping. Reports came in regularly of mysterious aid shipments appearing on plague-stricken worlds. Medical supplies that were more advanced than anything the galaxy could produce. Food that could grow in poisoned soil. Technology that could restore failed communication networks. But the aid came with no human representatives. No negotiations with governments. No formal diplomatic contact. The humans would appear, provide help, and disappear again, leaving behind only grateful populations and equipment that worked better than anything they had ever seen. "They are bypassing us completely," Councillor Jexara observed, her branches drooping with exhaustion. "They give aid to worlds that need it, but they ignore our governments entirely." It was worse than being ignored. The humans were demonstrating that galactic civilization could function without the Council. Individual worlds were forming direct relationships with humanity, trading knowledge and resources without any central authority. The old system was not just failing, it was being replaced. The morning that changed everything started like any other. The Council was in session, debating whether to formally dissolve the galactic government when the alerts began. Unknown ships entering the Sol system announced the early warning network. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Chancellor Vexthul struggled to stand. "How many ships?" "Impossible to determine," came the response. "The energy readings are unprecedented. The transmission screens activated, showing the space around Earth. What they saw left the entire Council speechless. Ships filled the solar system. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. They were beautiful in a way that no galactic vessel had ever been. Sleek curves that seemed to flow like water, energy fields that danced with colors that had no names, and a sense of power that was visible even through the transmission screens. But these were not just human ships. Among them were vessels of unknown design, clearly built by species that the galaxy had never encountered. The humans had not just survived beyond the rim, they had thrived. They had found new allies, new friends, new civilizations to join their confederation. Admiral Chen, a woman who had been a young officer when humanity left, appeared on the communication screen. She looked older, confident, and completely at ease with the massive fleet surrounding her. "Greetings, Galactic Council," she said, in perfect galactic standard. "We received your messages requesting assistance. We are here to help." Chancellor Vexthal stepped forward, his remaining functional arms shaking. "Admiral Chen, we are grateful for your response. The galaxy is in crisis. We need your expertise, your technology, your knowledge to restore order." Admiral Chen smiled, but it was not an unkind expression. "Chancellor, we are happy to provide assistance, but not to restore the old order. That system failed. We are here to help build something better." "What do you mean?" Thexhai asked, though he suspected he already knew. "We mean that the age of galactic hierarchy is over," Admiral Chen replied. "We will not return to a system where 12 species rule over thousands. We will not restore a government that ignored the voices of the young, the different, the innovative." Behind her, the view screen showed images of the human confederation, vast space habitats that housed billions of beings, planets transformed into gardens that supported dozens of species in harmony, research stations where beings that had never met before worked together on projects that defied galactic understanding. "This is what we have built," Admiral Chen continued. "A civilization based on cooperation, not control. On growth, not stagnation. On inclusion, not hierarchy. Any world, any species, any government that wishes to join us is welcome. But we will not compromise our principles to restore your old system." The terms were clear. Individual worlds could receive unlimited aid and support if they agreed to join the Human Confederation. They could participate in research projects that promised medical advances beyond imagination. They could trade with civilizations that possessed technologies that seemed like magic. But the Galactic Council, as it currently existed, was finished. "What about us?" Counselor Jexara asked. "What about the species that have led galactic civilization for millennia?" "You are welcome to join as well," Admiral Chen said. "But not as rulers. As equals, as partners, as contributors rather than controllers." The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Council's 10,000-year history. Species that had never questioned their right to rule found themselves facing a choice they had never imagined. Some, like the ancient Gorvani, rejected the offer entirely. They would rather see their own civilizations collapse than accept equality with species they considered inferior. They departed the council chambers and were never seen again. Others, like the Zenthari, were intrigued. They had always been curious about new ideas and technologies. The possibility of learning from civilizations beyond the galaxy was too attractive to ignore, but it was Counselor Thexhai who made the decision that defined the galaxy's future. "Admiral Chen," he said, standing slowly, "the Corvan Union officially requests to join the Human Confederation. We accept equality. We accept partnership. We accept the chance to become better than what we have been." Within days, the transformation began. Human medical teams arrived on plague-stricken worlds with cures that worked instantly and permanently. Human engineers restored communication networks with technology that was more reliable than anything previously imagined. Human diplomats helped resolve conflicts that had raged for generations, but they were not alone. With them came beings from species that the galaxy had never encountered. Silicon-based crystalline entities that thought in mathematical symphonies. Energy beings that existed as pure consciousness. Machine intelligences that had transcended their original creators. The Human Confederation was not just humanity. It was a collection of civilizations that had chosen growth over stagnation, cooperation over competition, inclusion over hierarchy. Some worlds joined immediately. Others watched and waited. A few rejected the offer and tried to maintain independence, only to find themselves increasingly isolated as their neighbors embraced the new reality. The Galactic Council held its final session 6 months after the humans returned. Chancellor Vexthal, barely alive but determined to see the transition completed, officially dissolved the government that had ruled for 10 millennia. "We tried to build an empire," he said in his final speech, "but empires always fall. The humans understood something we did not. They built a community, and communities can grow forever." Thexhai was elected as the Corvan representative to the Confederation Council. The new government bore no resemblance to the old one. Every species had an equal voice. Decisions were made by consensus rather than decree. Leadership rotated based on expertise rather than tradition. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was nothing like the ordered hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for millennia. It was also alive in a way the old system had never been. As HFY stood in the new council chambers, watching beings from hundreds of species work together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system, he thought about the humans who had left so quietly 5 years ago. They had not conquered the galaxy. They had not imposed their will through force.